7%, and they want to bring it down to 20%. That is the municipal standard, maximum grade 20% for driveway access within the municipal road right-of-way. As you can see here, this is the driveway plan that would be used if they had to build in the existing site. As you can see, there would be some significant switchbacks to attain that 20% maximum grade. And the orange dots represent the number of trees that would likely be removed, both to accommodate the driveway improvement and also for the safety of the house and for views. In the proposed siting, this would allow the driveway to be extended and the extent of the switchbacks to be reduced. So there overall would be about half the amount of trees removed for the driveway and for safety of the house and views. This application was circulated internally, and some of the concerns that arose were around the Lieben site. By allowing the house to be sited closer to the sea, it would also be closer to the Lieben site. So staff has recommended that council suggest that the applicant enter into a restrictive covenant between the proposed development and the Lieben site, some sort of vegetative buffer or screening. Details can be discussed. The staff recommendation at this time is for council to authorize public notice be given that this application will be considered at the October 10th council meeting. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Is the neighbor agreeable to the
north of it?
to the other neighbor?
The neighbor has expressed some concerns, and as far as I know, the applicant and the neighbors are in discussions right now.
Okay. Okay.
So there'll be, I assume there'll be a site visit organized.
Upon request.
Okay. I'd like to try that.
I'm interested as well. And Sue Ellen and I
Yeah.
recently went to the Lieben site and walked around. And I'm not quite sure how all this is fitting together. And it's,
Okay. Yes.
The covenant's a new idea. Did I miss that in the report?
Yes, that was brought up after the report was submitted.
So, how does the public know about that when they're commenting?
I could put up I guess an update
An update
to the
Yeah.
report.
Yeah, I guess that's also to make it clear, because I had to guess that it was Lieben that was next door because it was zone G2. It doesn't refer to it as Lieben in the report. My other question had to do, you don't have the map with the trees that are coming down on the
Sorry.
report, up on the PowerPoint.
A map?
In here, there's a map with the
Those ones-
legend
those
trees
ones
to
there.
be removed.
Yes.
Those ones?
Yes.
Yeah, no, this has got more blobs.
It's
Well,
the
that's
same.
same.
I just separated out into two maps. They're on the same map in that
Report.
in the report. Yeah,
Okay.
just shown with the dotted circle.
So it's not two rows of trees then?
No, it's,
They're the orange trees that are one row of 4 trees is here, and they're all going to be removed?
Yeah,
Or
so
there's 2 rows of 4
these-
trees, so 8 trees?
This cluster of trees here.
Yeah,
So the applicant is saying that if they were to build in the existing site, they would require more tree removal for safety, for like fall hazard. And if it were to be built lower down the hill, they wouldn't have to remove as many trees.
okay, because I didn't understand that at all. It looked to me as if to do the existing site, they were going to remove 4, and to do the proposed site, they were going to remove 4. So it's the same.
Yeah, I don't have the report in front of me, but I think the ones that are going to be removed also have a dot in them.
Well, there's a red circle with a dot in the middle,
Which
an
means
orange
they will be
circle.
removed.
And then there's just a bunch of orange circles, which says existing site, but the caption up above that is trees to be removed, so.
Time for site visit.
I just don't understand this map at all, and so
Okay.
if I'm confused, maybe everybody else will be too. It didn't make sense. I didn't know whether that was our map or the applicant's map, or.
One thing I would ask of planning is if we could have site visits for all of our DPPs, I think it's important, so if we just go forward.
Okay. gets to read this.
Would you like me?
Go ahead.
Never get the right one. That notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development variance permit DBP 05-2017 for the variance of setback to the sea for 1395 at Eagle Cliff Road, legally described as Lot B, Plan 11138, Block 2, DL 1552, PID 009146083 at the October 10th, 2017 meeting of council, and that council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of DBP 05-2017 in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of legally described as 1395 Eagle Cliff Road, legally described as Lot B, Plan 11138, Block 2, DL 1552, PID 009146083. See why you got me to read that.
You could say recommendation as shown in the.
That was more fun.
Can I have someone move that?
Yes, I'll move
Second.
that.
All in favor? Okay, it's passed unanimously. Oh, Daniel, you're up next. Thanks, Emma.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I'm here today to talk initially about the Grafton Lake development. So this is a rezoning bylaw that's before you that received first reading, and we've come back with a couple updates. So just a refresher for those of you or people in the audience, Grafton Lake development and the large development around the center of Grafton Lake, the center of Bowen Island. It's about a 350-acre site. So what specifically I wanted to bring up today was the affordable housing component of that development. So as council I'm sure knows, we'll just Bowen Island has an affordable housing policy. It's a policy, it's also a statement in the OCP that 15% of the floor area of development be dedicated as affordable housing. Our housing policy also talks about these units intended to be cost neutral to the developer. So based on the extent of the development in the Grafton Lake proposal, this would be about 45 units over the whole proposal. So done in phases throughout the development, but 45 units is what we're talking about. So our affordable housing policy defines affordable, so it's non-market units that may only be owned or rented under the terms of the housing covenants registered on title in favor of Bowen Island municipality. So throughout the process of the development up till now, we've been working on the assumption of a rental housing component for those 45 units. That's sort of been the developer's goal from the start. And staff have been working on this idea of the Vancouver CMA, so Metro Vancouver market rate as the market rate on Bowen, and 10% below that being the affordable rental rate here on Bowen. So that's something that's tracked by the CMHC that they update regularly, and that would be our affordable rental rate. This is a little smaller, but enlarged it. But here we are. So this being this total rental market here. So for a 1-bedroom, it's showing the market at $1,159, a 2-bedroom at $1,450, which puts that affordable at $1,000 or at $1,300 a month rental rate. So the developers come back and said they can't do that, provide those rental units at a cost-neutral basis for those rental rates. So they had instead talked about the 2005. So this is this number in CMHC reports that talks about, but what's the average rental rate for buildings that have been built since 2005? So saying we need to compare it to newer construction. And so this is for the Vancouver CMA. So again, all of Metro Vancouver buildings that have been built since 2005 looks at a 1-bedroom renting at, and Kathy correct me, about $1,543 in 1974. So that puts that affordable rent 10% below that 2005 number for a 1-bedroom at $1,479 and a 2-bedroom at $1,777. And I'm focusing on these two because this, for the Grafton Lake proposal, they're proposing largely 2-bedroom units. So I'm sort of looking at this as the primary numbers. So what you have in your report is sort of a options put forward from the applicant, because when we looked at these numbers, we thought, okay, it's really hard to say that something provided at 10% below 2005 levels, so $1,700 for a 2-bedroom, $2,000 for a 3-bedroom, to in any way say that that's sort of affordable housing on Bowen, you know, maybe that ends up being cost neutral for the developer. They can build it and they can rent it, but to say that that's an affordable housing unit.
Daniel, this is the same question that's being asked for the next
Mhm.
rezoning as well, so it's something
Yeah.
that council needs to consider for both rezoning
Yeah.
applications.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something that does come up. So in this report, the applicants provided a letter where they sort of looked at, okay, what are options then that we could do? So what they provided was, you know, so sort of initially been working on this assumption of 45 units rented at 10% below Vancouver CMA. It's sort of, that's been our staff recommendation. That's been the assumption going forward. They put forward 3 different options. So one would be instead to rent these 45 units at 10% below that 2005 rate. And then they put forward 2 options to instead produce some units as affordable home ownership units. And they're looking specifically at this area, it's sort of in the area of where the water treatment plant is proposed to be. So outside the Grafton Lake watershed, on the north side of
Did you say
Grafton Road.
that, sorry, water treatment plant?
Oh, yeah, so sort of, yeah, I'll go to, this one shows in the overall development. So this is Grafton Road, this is where the orchard is, and so the sort of the path into the lake is here now. This is where the water treatment plant is proposed, and our water line comes out along here. So they're proposed sort of in this area in here, so we sort of circled it, but just,
And so that's also part of phase 1, right?
and that's part of phase 1.
So that would come online
Initially, yeah.
like this.
Yeah, so it's to see, okay, you know, so their options that they put forward, so one being, okay, we'll rent them at that 10% below 2005 rates, that would be cost neutral. We won't need to change anything, it'll be straightforward, but they'd be rented, you know, at a higher rate. They then put forward 2 sort of blended options of, you know, some of them remaining rental and some being sold as affordable home ownership units, being 5 or 10, and looking at then covenants placed on similar to the Valterra things in terms of what can a maximum price be, what can a maximum resale price be, who is eligible for purchase of those units. Yeah, that's what I've gone through. So the applicant indicates preference for option 2, so that 35 units rented at a lower rate and 10 affordable home ownership units. And so staff out of those 3 options would again probably recommend that second option. So renting 35 at that lower rate and having 10 available for resale. Just the other thing just in the report is the applicant has provided a number of technical studies over the last couple of weeks, so they're there for council to review. Staff will be reviewing them in greater detail and meeting with the applicant prior to second reading as well to see what refinement needs to happen to bring forward for second reading, which is scheduled for the October 10th council meeting. So turn over for council for discussion on that affordable housing piece.
Daniel, so to be absolutely clear here, what you're looking for really is our ratification or agreement on option 2, so we can at last move this ahead to the next stage and get this to the second reading.
Exactly, yeah, for that affordable housing piece.
I think I'd like to jump in on this one. I think I would propose that we would want all rental units, first of all. If we go to a model of you can sell the house, but now a covenant has to be put on it, and subsequent resales have to be linked to cost of living increases or so on, and houses can be upgraded, they can be well maintained, poorly maintained, all manner of things can happen over the next 10 or 20 years. So where people have these affordable housing projects, like they have at Valterra, they have a group that is handling it. Now, if we had an affordable housing department in the municipality or a group that ran all of our affordable housing on the island, it might be feasible. But without that administrative ability or capacity in place, I don't think that the sale of affordable houses, and this is not next year, right? This is staged over whatever the length of time is that the project is built. I think the rental units, which I also believe we're in greater need of, having 45 rental units associated with this, I think is great. And I believe that the way that that will actually play out in the fullness of time, typically with a developer, is they will do like a sixplex, and then they will sell that as a unit to an investor who is buying it as real estate and looking at getting their capital return rate, cap rate on it, return on investment, and they might be happy with getting 5% return. Whereas the developer, when he's looking at the cost of a mortgage and all this sort of stuff, would be looking at more. So these things become, you know, sort of a dentist retirement project in the fullness of time. And so when you get into the affordable rent aspect, if the affordable rent can't be done on a cost-neutral basis, so that you're asking the developer to not only give you free land for the buildings that they're putting up, but then subsidize it, and then project that into the future phase by phase throughout their whole project. I think it gets way too complicated, and the rents that are, if they were gonna base it on all of Vancouver rents, are too damn high anyway, right? So I would suggest that we allow them to simply charge market rent on Bowen Island. And that makes the projects saleable to a purchaser further down the road who would be buying a rental building. Without that complication of always having to figure out, you know, what rent controls are on this. And again, 10 years down the road, how do you even police it? How do you even know what's happening? Go ahead.
Just ask for clarification. You got to the point where you said just allow the developer to rent them at market rates on Bowen Island?
Well, at whatever mark, yeah, because it will be. Right. In other words, we're in a really weird situation right now where you can rent anything for anything, right, just because of pure desperation. But the economy will turn, you know, times will change. Things will level out again. And if you make it so that nobody can ever afford to build rental buildings because they're competing against subsidized rents on other projects, you're defeating yourself, you know, you're fighting the market. Yeah.
But aren't we having this conversation because the challenge was, once the math was done on the construction, that the applicant wasn't able to have 45 units rented at the level that's being proposed?
Right, unless if we allowed him to do it at the post-2005 level, then he was okay with that. So we don't, what I'm getting at is we don't know if he can get that rent or not. If he can get that rent and going forward it works out that is a market rent on both, that is a rent that you can get, right? But we have to be adding 45 units here and 25 units there and 15 units there. Like, we have to build up a rental stock on Bowen, and that's going to give us a market that is going to make these things, get rid of the distortion in the market, I guess is what I'm saying. And if we do affordable, we create more distortion in the market. We don't get rid of it. I'll go to Gary first and Sue Ellen.
Just very quickly, we've had 3 propositions tonight, and all of them are starting to amend their situation because it's not, they can't do all rental housing. So I think we really have to look at that seriously and say, how can we make it work for both, you know, the developer and to get our housing? And if they can't do 45 units, can't do 45 units. I think it's better off. I think and home ownership isn't a bad deal either. We do need, there's certainly a market for that, low cost home ownership.
I appreciate that. If the developer can't do it with no rent controls, right, then it has to be revisited.
As far as the administration, I mean, it's going to have to be covenanted on title.
My suggestion would be that we wouldn't have to do anything. If we get the owner, he's doing a project to sell houses, right? We're saying, no, you can't sell all of the units here. You have to make 45 of them rental. I think that is an amenity to the community without further trying to calculate what the rent has to be. And if we succeed, we screw up the market anyway, right? And we can't project 10 years into the future, and if these things don't run for a long period of time, the project won't have even been finished being built out before it's obsolete. So I kind of think that whole affordable housing thing was a social engineering idea that probably works great in big cities. But in little towns like us, I don't think we have a big enough market to make it work. I'm gonna go to Sue Ellen first and then Melanie.
Oh, several things. One of them is that our official community plan includes an
Mhm.
affordable housing policy.
Yes.
So I would be really reluctant to give that up, especially since we've been hearing from the public tonight, as we did during the OCP, that affordable housing was like a major issue on Bowen. And in fact, during the OCP, which was back in 2010, we did the process, it was one of the two dominant community themes. And so I'm reluctant to get rid of an affordable housing policy because it might take some administration. Secondly, I think we need rental. And I'm not, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I think, well, anyway, never mind that. I'm wondering if, Daniel, can you remind me, we have a bunch of housing agreements, including with Belterra, we have them with, most recently, the distillery. Can you remind me what the arrangement was there? Is there any affordable housing in
The
or what-
pub, I believe, had 2 units that were designated
the pub? That's
affordable.
it, yeah.
And the distillery had, I believe, 2 as well.
Because what I'd like to do is, personally, I'd like to find out what, I'd like to have us to have one policy, or as close to it as we can, or at least have all of our different policies in front of us when we're making these decisions. Because it seems to me, by treating them as one-offs, we can confuse ourselves and not be fair to everybody on Bowen. And then the other thing I have to say is about the supportive reports, so I'll come back to that, or would you like me to go ahead with other topics?
No, let's stick to this.
Yeah.
The affordable housing policy, I think, is the big sticking point here. And, yeah, again, I'm apologies, go ahead, Melanie.
Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of option 2. I have to be honest, when I read it, these would be located in area 5, great, becomes online first, and when I read, would be single-family cottages, 2 bed, 1 bath, 800 square feet, would sell for 400 to 450. To me, that sounds like a dream. Like, honestly, I don't know how many families I know now that would just jump at the chance to be able to do that, long-time Bowen families. That's something that's doable. I like the combination. When I look down, it says that it could bring down rents to be for a 3-bedroom unit at less than 1,500. That's incredible. You know, when we moved to the island 4 years ago, we would have jumped at a chance at that. Those sorts of prices are, okay, they're not super affordable, but they're doable. And we don't have anything like this on the island right now. There's nothing. So I have to say, I like option 2.
Yes. Matt?
Sure.
Can I just ask that it seems that there's a convergence of agreement between yourself and the developer on option 2.
I mean, I think my preference would still be, the 45 units at the affordable rate. But, I think if that's not possible, then out of the 3 options that they presented, I prefer option 2, because I would prefer greater rental control over, the greater number.
I mean, my feeling is this is a very significant development, and it's multi-phased. It's a developer with really considerable integrity, and quite honestly, only one person can drive the ship, and ultimately it's the developer. If that person's preference is for this particular option, I'm personally hugely swayed by that, and I think the point that Melanie raised about the houses and the description of those houses is also very germane, and I would be quite happy if that's his wish, it's acceptable to our planning department to move ahead to the next step and get this done. That's another thing we can agree on tonight.
Maureen?
I would also support option 2, and I also am uncomfortable at revisiting an affordable housing policy that we've been working with for some time.
Yeah, that's.
I'm happy with option 2, and I guess I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill for the processing in the paper. we've got a sample covenant from Belterra for purchase units, and we've got sample covenants for rental units from a couple we've done, the Affordable Housing Task Force or whatever we were called. We drafted sample covenants and we used the Whistler model, and there seemed to be an implication in your comments that they were left to go to rack and ruin. I mean, whether it's affordable or not affordable, people may or may not keep it up. I mean, there's lots of houses that are, market prices are paid for that don't get looked after. So that's a personal choice. So I'm quite happy with option 2. And I guess the only question would be, would we have a draft of the affordable housing purchase covenant before the public hearing? You were gonna bring
Yeah.
Belterra for sample for us.
Yeah, the Belterra one actually is in your package, so put it for
Okay.
later. It's with the Bellringer
Okay.
thing. So whether or not it would be for the next council meeting, we would definitely have before the public hearing, like points that would be in the housing agreement, if that makes sense. So we don't have to do the full complete legal document, that would be like the principal points.
Okay, is there any more discussion on that? Gary?
It's just, just the recommendation itself, that council directs staff to prepare a draft housing agreement for the Grafton Lake lands. I mean, we can put whatever we want in there and make sure it's secure. I'm
Okay.
confident about that.
Do we direct staff to prepare it, or have it prepared by the applicant for staff review?
So for this application, we would have our legal counsel prepare, and then we're working on a cost recovery basis for the
Okay.
application.
So we move this to pass, is that?
Yes, please.
Okay. And you like the idea of reading the whole thing instead of saying as per the agenda?
But then can I bring up some other things too after that?
Well, if it's part, is it part of this motion?
I have some questions, but it's about the report.
It's
that's
about
all.
the reports, all those attached reports.
And what I would do, just for clarification, is I would read everything but the last paragraph. Maybe you want to adopt that first, that's in relation to...
Yeah, can we split them?
Yeah. Maybe I should read it out. Sure. That council directs staff to prepare a draft housing agreement for the Grafton Lake Lands Development Application File RZ 05-2015 based on the following. Applicant to provide 35 units of rental housing to be rented at rates 10% below the Vancouver CMA total rental universe. The applicant would also provide 10 units of affordable housing ownership on lands on the north side of Grafton Lake, outside the Grafton Lakes watershed, to eligible purchasers.
Okay. Call the question? All in favor? Okay. Opposed? I'd like that one noted. Okay, council directs staff, the bylaws. What are our questions on bringing forward the bylaws?
Okay, if I can start, I'm looking at, my question is, how much of the proposed nature reserve may be flooded? And I did a little search for the word climate, and I came up with some, this is in the Grafton Lake storage capacity by Creus Engineering. I'm on page 8 of 20, which I think was page 20. Anyway, it said, one of the things it said was raising the control dam to about 2 feet would provide the additional storage allowed under the MOE, the Ministry of Environment license. So there is that idea of raising the dam is alive, and that we talked about at an earlier meeting, 2 meetings ago, I guess. And then I'm looking at page 11 of 20, so a couple pages on, and it's top of the page, it says, these works will require some changes to the seasonal water level and will affect some of the upland tenure. This development is proposing to put the tenure of the lands immediately surrounding the lake into BIM control, as I would say, as nature reserve. This is critical to give the municipality flexibility. So I would like to see, if we can, before the next meeting, a map and a calculation showing what proportion of the proposed nature reserve and where would be flooded under this if the dam was raised to feed.
So as part of this development, there's no proposal to raise the dam.
Well, what I'm seeing here is a study that goes along with this development, and it's talking about the future under climate change, not necessarily this development. Maybe this development doesn't pay for this work, I don't know, but the point is, how do we make a decision about a nature reserve that the proponents, engineers, suggest may need to be flooded at some point in the future?
Yeah.
So I would like to see that spatially, some kind of map, and also the percentage, what percent of the proposed nature reserve may be flooded at some point in the future if the dam is raised, as the Grafton Lake storage capacity, Creus Engineering suggests it may well have to. So that's that one. And then,
Can I ask a question about water before you move on?
Yeah.
Because I just have to, I think my points would follow on
Yeah.
from yours. I read through the Creus report, and the only thing that I was not confident about in regards to water was, it talks about all the studies that have been done to date. Well, I think we perhaps are going into a different sort of climate, and I didn't get any confidence that relying on the lake going forward, whether, future climate predictions have been put into place. If we're gonna go into a regime where we could possibly gonna go dry, like no rain for 2 to 3 months, is there enough water going into the lake to be able to, like that I didn't get a firm answer from this report going forward. And I think we have to acknowledge that the systems on the water systems are gonna, the rain systems are gonna change. And I think we need to monitor that, because I did say that you can raise the level of the dam, but if we don't have rain coming down and filling up that dam, then I think it's rather,
The report says winters will be generally wetter.
It does, but perhaps my fears are, there's no, maybe, they're not warranted, but what I'm worried about is that if we go dry for 3 months, I've seen the lake now, it looks rather low. Will the lake be able to withstand it going, levels diminishing and additional being taken out of that if there's no replenishment for 3 months? And so that's the only answer I didn't get any confidence in. I understand that there's been previous studies and they indicate that it's all fine and dandy, but that I think was done before we had 2 years of drought conditions, so.
I agree with what Councillor Mason is saying, because they don't refer to the specific projections, for example, that at the last council meeting, or the one meeting in July, council recommended to staff to look at these projections.
Yeah.
It doesn't refer to those, which is more recent data.
Right.
And then the other part that I worry about too is that drawdown, that bathtub ring, or the gap between where the water is when it's high, and then as the water is taken out, especially as the summers get longer and drier, you get this zone of where nothing can grow. And that's in those reports that I proposed, those climate projections for Metro Vancouver and for the Southern Gulf Islands. It talks about that being a condition that could lead to more sedimentation and more muck in the water. And so I would like to see that addressed here too in terms of wildlife. I see the critter tunnels, the wildlife tunnels, the critter culverts under the road and the pathway. But what I don't see in here is anything about how the lake and the ecology, a healthy ecology for healthy water, right? Healthy, clean water. How does that drawdown ring get affected? I'm trying to. I would like that information.
I understand. I think that it's maybe not an appropriate discussion given what, it has to do with how many houses we put on Cove Bay water and how climate change affects us. And it's very tangentially associated with this building application, because really, we will own the land around the lake. And as the water goes up and down, it will be in our control, as opposed to the control of the builder.
Is that I don't think we've ever seen this sort of change before, where we potentially could have summer after summer, where we have long chunks of time where we don't. So that lake might not be filling up. Like, I understand that we can raise the level, right, and fill it up with more water to, to serve more house. But if that bathtub is not being filled up
Right.
for certain parts of the time, that's what I don't know what to do with it. That might
Right.
sort of, that's the unknown equation now as we enter
Yeah.
into climate change.
And it's fair enough. I will say though that we've got, the report that was done when the dam was raised said that by raising the dam, we could put another 395 houses on it.
But what I'm worried about is that was done before we started seeing this type of different change.
No, we had a 100-year drought in 2007.
Okay.
We have had some very serious drought conditions post-2000, and the lake never dropped all that much. It goes down 1 meter and then it slows down absolutely. Our intake is 22 feet under the water. The highest point of the line is 11 feet below the water level. I appreciate the point that you're making about it changing the hydrology of the lake and around the outside, but my point is, as much as it's a discussion we should have, I don't believe that this is the place, the issue to have it on, because the number of units that is being put on by this project comes nothing like approaching what we're hoping to put on that lake. Right, this is just
This
one
is where the
part.
report was, and it's an opportunity for me to speak about it in a council meeting, and it's tied to this development. So I thought that might be the time to ask the questions before we get further along, because this is about planning, and it's about what land do we take on as a municipality? Are we taking on